INSAIT is about making massive impact. And what we want to do in building up INSAIT is a basic principle is focus on the people, get the best people and give them amazing resources, world-class resources, give them the conditions to dream and to work with other people and just let them innovate, okay, let them create. That's the kind of people we want. We want people who can capture the imagination of the world with the research that they do, and that's very important. So disruptive, not just incremental work.
Hello, the Recursive community. This is Elena, an innovation reporter at the Recursive. Today I'm excited to interview Professor Martin Vechev, the architect of the newly founded INSAIT, the first AI institute in Southeastern Europe. Professor Vechev, you've shared that ever since you started in Cambridge, it's been a dream of yours to create a world-class AI center in Bulgaria. How long did it actually take to make this dream come true?
I had the dream for a long time, so somewhere starting around 2003 when I applied to Cambridge, and I had to write in my application that what the long-term goal for me would be. And I wrote this idea that I want to create world-class center institutions in Bulgaria, similar to Cambridge, right? And since then, I continued in some way, one form or another, some shape or form, working on this idea. I created actually the first exchange program for Bulgarian students from our universities in Bulgaria, which could visit the world-famous IBM T.J. Watson Research Center, which was the largest industrial research center in the world, where I was working at the time. And so this was around 2009, 2010, and a bunch of people came actually as exchange students in that program. So I've always wanted to keep this connection. And we started actually working with more actively on this idea about the center itself, somewhere around April 2019.
You're a professor at ETH Zurich and also founder of 3 successful deep tech startups. How is this combined experience helping you to structure INSAIT now?
There is a couple of points here. So first of all, a lot of the work that professors do in these places like the ETH Zurich or the MITs or Stanfords or Cambridge and whatnot, has a lot of the elements during their day-to-day work. They have a lot of elements that are also present when you create startups. So you need to define the problem, you need to find the open problems, you need to raise funding in order to build a group, you need to document write the papers, come up with ideas, be very creative about what the problems are and how you solve them, explain them very clearly to people. And so it has a lot of this entrepreneurial kind of spirit during the whole research process already. It's kind of baked in the process, and it's very competitive as well. It's extremely competitive to be working in some of these areas. Very frequent deadlines. You're competing with the best place in the world. Also recruiting students, teaching courses, state-of-the-art courses. And so during the whole process itself, there is already a lot of the startup qualities to be a successful entrepreneur that you develop during this process. So this is really nice, and I think that also explains to some degree why many of the deep technological startups are founded in those places. Kind of the startup process is not exactly the same, but it's very similar to what goes on in these places, very diverse, right? And then of course, the startup world has its own peculiarities. Also that are a bit different than academia, where mostly you're focusing on a single product. You're trying to get a customer base, and also fundraising. Of course, you need to convince investors, which may not be experts, but you need to convince them of your vision, which also is very similar actually to grant writing when you're trying to raise money. So a lot of these elements, and the speed, of course, the speed when you're developing a startup, it's actually similar to the speed in which you have to do research to these world-class places. And so this kind of merge, I think, is very healthy, very exciting for me. The two worlds, which are actually not so far apart. And really, it's like different sides of the same coin, which has to do with creating large-scale impact on society, right? And so that's basically what's happening. And then the fundraising aspect especially is something that is done frequently in startups, and I think we had to do fundraising during forming this INSAIT initiative. So that's definitely more of a startup entrepreneurship thinking. And just doing what it takes, not stopping, and just keep going and adjusting on the fly. I think these are very much qualities that are developed in the startup world.
In the Recursive community, we have a lot of startup founders and investors in our audience. Can we do a little abstract experiment and look at INSAIT as a startup? What would its unique value proposition be?
INSAIT is actually an incubator for creating people, world-class talent, attracting world-class talent, developing world-class talent, and then building those people up to the point where they're really at the top level. Think of them as a technological leader, right? So you're creating the most valuable thing, the most valuable asset that a country or an ecosystem needs, which is the people. So this is one of the absolutely must-have points at INSAIT. The basis, the fundamentals is focused around people. And once you create those people, they have an extreme value to the startup world, to the technological world, and they also make the link to these companies and academia and the research later when they create themselves startups or they create projects. They're directors or engineers. They know how the world-class research works, and they even can do joint projects. So really, the first value proposition has to do with creating world-class talent, attracting and developing it, which is the most valuable thing an ecosystem can have. And then the second the second asset would be actually the ideas and the research and the world, state-of-the-art research and the prototypes that are being created there, which from these prototypes, actually use those to create then the deep technological startups that we did and many other people did. So it's people and technology and the know-how, because once you create a startup, it's not enough just to have the first product. Oftentimes the startup has to pivot, right? There is competition, there is market changes, there is all kinds of things that need to happen. Often they need to pivot and slightly change the product or completely change it. And having a world-class organization to which you can have full access is invaluable, because when you have to pivot and you need to know what the state of the art is, you can just talk to those people and they tell you, and it's much easier to pivot, make informed decisions. And so this is really about this. It's about creating and developing world-class talent, building up this ecosystem, having access to the absolutely state-of-the-art research, which is fundamental, absolutely must-have for deep technological startups, and not just one time when you create the startup, but also continuously during the operation of the company, especially during the first 2-3 years when the company is getting formed. And right, it's very critical that it has this. Well, after this, maybe after 3-4 years, gets more stable and already, it can go by itself. And not just for the companies that are being created, it's also for the companies that already exist or are created elsewhere, and they just want to discuss some know-how or just want to ask questions. And so I think this is absolutely unique as a proposition. And of course, beyond just the people that are being developed, beyond just the technology, there is also the impact on the difficult to quantify aspects, which is the status of the country and of the ecosystem, right? Because if you have something like the MIT, like the Cambridge or the Stanford or the ETHs, it benefits people who may not even be directly involved, startups who may not even be directly involved, because when they fundraise, they can say, hey, if we need some know-how or we want to kind of collaborate, we actually have this place, and this makes investors much more at ease to invest, because they know that it's not just a one-time thing. They always can get up-to-date research on what's happening. So it's incredible value for the ecosystem, absolutely needed, and it's a must-have. And I think entrepreneurs and startup founders and investors absolutely love these centers, to invest in those people, to discuss with those people, also in terms of evaluating investment opportunities in startups that they would like to invest. When they need expert opinion, they often come to us to say, should we invest or should we not invest? Can you technically evaluate the startup? And so this helps the ecosystem make more informed decisions and just be more successful entrepreneurs, more successful investors, which is what we want in Bulgaria.
You managed to convince big tech giants like Amazon, Google, and DeepMind to set the institute in Sofia, Bulgaria. What were your winning arguments? And why not elsewhere, like for example in the regions where these companies already have established operations?
This is a question that they ask themselves. And so what happens is there is a very interesting precedent being set here, and I think this captures the imagination of these companies as well, which is that even though they have investments in the region, in other places, right, there is no such institute anywhere in Eastern Europe. And so they also know, just like we discussed already, that having such an institute is very vital and very important for establishing their competitive advantage. And the reason is that oftentimes these big companies hire people from this talent from those places. They're often centered around those places like the MITs or the ETHs or the Cambridges, right, or in London, so that they can have access to talent. And so they know that if they help such a place flourish, they would also potentially get benefits in terms of hiring talent and hiring people, which is absolutely fundamental to their standing. And so that is one point, certainly. And of course, then it's having joint projects, just expanding the outreach in the region, having a partner that for the first time that they can trust and they can rely on, and that follows the same world-class operation and template that other places that they used to working with operate in that way, right? So it makes them more at ease. So that's a couple of points. And of course, they also want to make impact. They want to be known as making impact. They do want to make impact on society. And INSAIT is about making massive impact. And they identify with the mission of INSAIT to make massive impacts. And so they feel partial to this idea. And this is why they some of the reasons they decided to proceed. And of course, of the people factor as well. Many of us, myself and many of the people on the boards, on the supervisory boards, on the advisory boards, have close personal connections to those people. We've worked with them. We have interacted with them professionally. We appear in the same conferences. And so they feel a kind of a trust bond with the people involved at INSAIT. So it's also there's a social factor and personal factor as well.
Besides those big tech giants, you also managed to get on board people from the local tech community. To mention them, these are Васил Терзиев, Богомил Балкански, Иван Осмак, Атанас Симеонов, Неделчо Спасов, Станимир Василев, Светозар Георгиев, Христо Христов, Любомир Минчев, Иво Евгениев. How did you manage to get them on board? And if we draw the parallel with INSAIT being a startup, what was their investment logic?
It's actually very simple. Once they saw the potential that INSAIT can have on society, not just in Bulgaria, but in the region, Eastern Europe, in Europe as a whole, such a unique place that's never been created before in Eastern Europe. It's absolutely amazing. And so those people also identify, and their value system has to do with creating things that can change the world, not just investing in a particular company. And because they identify with the mission of INSAIT, they decided to support that mission. And it wasn't so difficult to convince them at all, which I'm actually very pleased. I'm very happy that Bulgarian entrepreneurs, our local entrepreneurs, decided so quickly to actually invest in it. They didn't dwell too much about it. And this is actually absolutely wonderful. And I think that's the reason. They see the amazing potential this can have on our society, on our children and their children, just making a better, not just ecosystem, just a better society, better for the country, better for the nation. And I think that because they identify with the mission of INSAIT, of changing Bulgaria through science, through research, attracting people, bringing people back, being a building block of the local ecosystem and helping it and us helping each other, it was a no-brainer, I think. And it's fantastic that SiteGround with state-of-the-art, world-class hosting company here in Bulgaria, Ivo Tsenov and Tenko Nikov, we only had 2 meetings with them, and they were convinced, and they've made a lot of impact on the world, but they also see the need to make the kind of impact that INSAIT will have on Bulgarian society. So it was wonderful, and of course the other investors, entrepreneurs, Vasil Terziev, I discussed with him, and he was absolutely convinced and saying that this is so important for Bulgaria. And then he also brought other entrepreneurs who I personally actually don't know, and I want to thank all of them that decided to support INSAIT's mission. And I actually want to say that these people who invested in Bulgaria, they're investing in Bulgaria through INSAIT. And I invite others, Bulgarians who are wondering what to do, to follow their example, because INSAIT is really a trailblazer and unique setup that I think is going to be a very long time until something like that comes again. And we need all the help we can get to make it possible.
You managed to attract significant funding from both the government and businesses. How will you now use this capital, what you invested in, and do you plan to fundraise additional capital?
We have raised around 170 million leva, so depending on the exchange rate, around $100 million over 10 years, however. So average roughly about $10 million a year, and some additional money, so about 15 million for the first few years, 3 to 4 years, from the big tech giants, Amazon Web Services, Google, DeepMind, as well as the Bulgarian company SiteGround and Bulgarian entrepreneurs, right? So we have those, we have that amount of funding. And so how do we plan to invest it? The majority of the expenditure goes to recruiting and paying the salaries of the researchers, which are one, the professors or the group leaders or the researchers, right, who lead those groups. That's one. And we plan around 25 people like that, so 25 big groups. And then for each group, there are PhDs, doctorate students, who spend about 4 to 5 years at INSAIT. So on average, a DTH is 4.7 years after masters, which is quite a long time. So let's say about 5 years. For 5 years, so we pay their salaries as well, and each group may have around 10 students and maybe some postdoctorates and other researchers working there. And of course, those startup researchers that we discussed already in the Deep Technology Startup Program. And so our main expenses go paying those salaries. And then of course, also the physical location, the rents and all other expenses like this. So those money may sound like a lot, 100 million, really is just 10 million, let's say 10 to 12 million dollars a year for maintaining what is a world-class organization is actually, it's sufficient to start initially, but of course we need more resources. So just to give you a comparison, my department of computer science at ETH Zurich, where I work, the funding is around between 80 and 100 million dollars a year. Right? And so it's about 10x difference. Now, of course, there is other factors there, and they're much bigger, and so on and so forth. But still, I mean, just to give a comparison, so that's one point. So, of course, we always want to fundraise more. Our salaries are high, they're, great salaries, great packages, and we want to be able to maintain this. So that's one part there, right, for the people. And also another thing that is very important, it's not well understood when it comes to running world-class organizations, is that you need flexible spending. So maybe 5% of the money that you spend, or 10% or 15% be some flexible spending, like internship programs for students from around the world, like the whole world, coming from all corners of the world, from ocean to ocean, coming to like Bulgaria. So we need to run such an internship program, and such an internship program for science is absolutely fundamental for recruiting talent, because that's how you spread the word around the world, by bringing those people in Sofia, especially those who are a bit more skeptical, right? Just to see what's going on here. So running such programs, organizing events, conferences, things like that, bringing people on sabbaticals, just somebody spending like 6 months at INSAIT, some world-renowned Nobel Prize person. And so there's a lot of flexible funding that we need. And the money that comes from the government actually can be spent flexibly for paying salaries who are full-time and paying the rents and things like this. But we have all kinds of flexible funding where always having more money is better for INSAIT. And that's why it's so important to have these donations that people do. And this is very standard in the American and the Israeli, let's say, way of thinking, of making those donations, helping those places, run, especially in the bootstrap phase when they're trying to get established. And so, yeah, we always are fundraising from people who believe in our cause of changing the world. So if you believe in changing the world, you have found a place which you can trust and that you can rely on to carry out this belief of yours like no other place can and will. And so you'll be very happy and very delighted, and make you very happy, and to help it progress and identify with itself and say that you are part of this success. So always open for people helping us in any way, shape or form.
Thank you. And you personally, what do you expect to be the societal and economic impact of INSAIT on the whole region?
One of the important bits here with the scientific research is that you do research and you discover new things about the way the world works, and you understand it, you publish it, and this research we hope and we want, and that's our target, it gets published in the top venues. And those top venues are where all of the big players are, kind of the Champions League of science. It's followed by the top places around the world, the MITs, the ETHs, the Stanfords, these places. And it's also followed by all the research units and divisions of the big companies like DeepMind and Google and OpenAI and those companies. And so this would put Bulgaria on the map, on really the top end, the high end of innovation map, for the scientific research, which is those conferences, those places where people go. So I'm very excited about this, placing Bulgaria's name there on a consistent basis, not just a one-off thing that happens. And of course, down the line, the INSAIT brand being recognized worldwide. So I think this is the way that's one side which I expect, one aspect which I expect the research at INSAIT to be impactful. And then, of course, on the other side is for creating deep technological companies and creating people, because I think there's no better way to create people, high-end people, than doing research, because research is all about identifying problems, solving those problems, and going through the whole pipeline, which is pretty much the pipeline you need for startups. And so I think it's wonderful.
Thank you. And how will the Institute translate this scientific research into deep tech businesses? And how can aspiring and established entrepreneurs benefit from your startup researcher program?
I think, the startup researcher program and in general, the connection between world-class science and the deep technological startups, I would say is not well understood. It's not. In Eastern Europe, certainly not. I think one of the reasons is there's just not this kind of world-class organizations in terms of research. And what we want to do in building up INSAIT as a basic principle is focus on the people, get the best people and give them amazing resources, world-class resources, give them the conditions to dream and to work with other people, and just let them innovate, okay, let them create. And so that's kind of the INSAIT setup. And then the question is, typically, when people are in these places, after they graduate or during the process, they kind of form their opinion which way they want to go. Do they want to become startup founders? Do they want to become professors? Do they want to be research leaders in certain organizations like Google or DeepMind? Do they want to be engineers? And all of these directions are fine and they're all great. None is better than the other. They're all really good. And so what we want to do, though, is to formalize a little bit more the process that we have been doing at ETH Zurich and also many of our friends at Stanford and in other places, which I think is not well documented how it works, in helping these people who want to go to the startup world to be more successful. And the way we do that is through the Startup Researcher Program. And the Startup Researcher Program, all it does is just formalizes the steps that we took, that we take in our day-to-day work towards doing research that can lead to a deep technological startup. Okay, so oftentimes what happens is very interesting that during the doctoral program, which is 5-6 years, somewhere in the middle, most people already made their decisions, and we want to make sure that if they kind of know they want to go the startup way, their research even before the seed round is already positioned in a way where it would yield itself to creating a deep technological startup, and not when they finish and then, they see, do I want to do a deep technological startup or not? Much earlier than that. And I think that's the trend also for the top investors, getting really close to the point where the person is even still deciding what to do in order to shape their research in a way which yield itself. Because if you wait too long, as people do now, many of these people who would actually be very successful startup founders, they would actually have to wait, and many of them wouldn't do it because once they finish, you don't have so much time to decide and what to do. So the Startup Researcher Program is absolutely an amazing thing that's never been done before in the world in terms of formalizing the process a little bit for people who want to go to the startup world, but they still need to do a lot of research and get in depth into the topic. So get that knowledge, work with really good people, and not an incubator. It's not an incubator. It's just thinking about the problems, getting deep into it. So think of it as kind of like doing the first 2 years of a PhD, But they don't do it with the purpose of publishing, they do it with the purpose of creating companies. And that's, I think, this program, which I think is amazing.
It is expected that around 300 professors and researchers will work in INSAIT alongside thousands of students. How do you plan to convince those faculty and students that Sofia is a good place to live and not only to delve into research?
Right, so I think that there are two aspects here. So the first aspect is, what conditions does INSAIT offer? What is the setup that INSAIT offers that would attract people over other places? Okay, so that's the first question. And so one condition, of course, is that we offer world-class financial conditions. We offer conditions which are comparable to those in the top 1% in the world's best universities in the world. And this has never happened before in Eastern Europe. It's the first time that this has ever happened. Somebody has even said those words. Okay, so we're going to do that in line with our philosophy that people should be given the resources not to think about administrative stuff, but just focus on the science, focus on the research, right? Focus on the technology. And so that's one aspect, certainly. Second aspect, which is equally important, is the value system that INSAIT follows, which is very different in conducting research than is done in almost basically anywhere in Eastern Europe or almost anywhere in Europe. Only very selected places follow this, which is really, again, focus on the people, the best people that you can get, give them freedom, and don't try to guide them, don't try to control them, leave them independent, and having a group of such people believing in that, and also people who want to do disruptive discoveries that change the basic assumption of what people believe in. That's the kind of people we want. We want people who can capture the imagination of the world with the research that they do, and that's very important. So disruptive, not just incremental work. And of course, last point is the country itself, which goes beyond INSAIT. And I think there are many, many amazing things about Bulgaria that people will find out more and more. So one is, of course, in the EU. So, for instance, if you're in the EU, unlike some other countries in Europe, in the European Union, you can actually apply to the coveted, these famous ERC grants, these major awards, which give you all the freedom to do what you want and develop these amazing results, right? So Bulgaria gives you this opportunity. The second thing, of course, is that people are extremely warm and open to, and people want this kind of center to happen. And so what's really amazing is that you can do research. The impact per unit of work is unmatched anywhere in the world, because if you do a publication in a top venue and you put Bulgaria on the map and you put the region on the map, in another country, where already this exists, this wouldn't be a big deal. Or it would be good, it'd be great, but it wouldn't. But here, the publication or the major technological startup you do or the major insight that you bring to the world would actually have much greater impact, because some of those things in the research-wise haven't been done before. And so you'd inspire many people in the region through your work. So your impact per unit of work is much greater than anywhere else in the world, basically. And that's what people want. People want to have impact, right? So for 1 second of work, you're making like $100,000 instead of making 100. And so that's also amazing. And of course, Bulgarians are extremely friendly to foreigners. Everybody speaks English. And the flat tax rate is also good, and the location is fantastic. There is the Black Sea, there is the mountains and all this. So it's really, I think, the most unique place to do research if you want to have impact.
And how can those interested researchers actually apply for INSAIT?
They just go to the website, go to insait.ai, and we have the forms. You send in your form, and this site is going to get updated more as more professors are joining. And one thing to mention here is that INSAIT has absolutely incredible competitive advantage over almost any other place in the world which has started, which is this deep link to the ETH Zurich and to the EPFL, because they're very close physically. And we already have agreement from many of their top professors to come to Sofia and engage, advise students, teach, transfer this know-how to the country, which if it wasn't so close physically, it would actually make it very, very, if it was a partnership with like some American university or something in Singapore or somewhere, even though they're big names, it actually wouldn't be able to do this kind of intimate exchange of knowledge of people. And the fact that we are close gives us this opportunity to be at INSAIT, but actually work very closely with absolutely world-class people and their groups, not just them, and be in that ecosystem. And so this is, all of these things are just amazing. And you go on the INSAIT website and you go to insait.ai and you send in your form, and it's going to get looked at. Of course, it's competitive, like all of these world-class places, right? But we are there. We're waiting for your applications, and we want you to tell other people that this is the, if you want to make impact on the world, and this is one of the best places to be right now.
Thank you. And I have a bonus question. Which of the world's biggest problems would you like to see be solved through a breakthrough research in INSAIT?
I think one of the important topics to address is personalized medicine. Personalized medicine, using AI in a good way to discover drugs, which can save lives. And this could be very personalized to your DNA, to your genetic makeup, to your current conditions. And this is, I think, one of the absolutely must address points that I'd love people at INSAIT to work on, researchers. Again, I'm not someone who will tell them what to work on, because they're absolutely independent and they can shape the world the way they want. And I'm sure they'll think of many things that nobody has ever thought before. But certainly, drug discovery, personalized medicine, and helping people, this is, I think, one of the big challenges and we encourage people, in this AI space to be exploring this. And fortunately, we have people already interested in this, applying, so we're very excited about that.
Thank you for watching. I hope that you found this interview as insightful as I did. Stay tuned for more The Recursive Connect videos, and in the meantime, read Stories That Shape Stories on our website.